Welcome to Hey Coach Tony, the top broadcast of youth sports, where you get to call in and give your opinion. Call 855-HEY-COACH. That's 855-439-2622. Give your opinion. And now here's your host, Tony Fiorino.
Hey, happy Saturday, everybody. Welcome to Hey Coach Tony. I am your host, Tony Fiorino, and as you know, each week here on Hey Coach Tony, we hit the hottest topics in youth sports. And as always, we want to hear what you guys have to say. So we've opened up the studio lines at 855-HEY-COACH. That is 855-439-2622. Hey, this week we got a special treat. Every once in a while, I am lucky enough to have one of the truly great high school and or college coaches join me in the studio. And today, I got to tell you, I am very pleased to announce that arguably the most respected baseball guy in the entire Northeast is with me today. Bob Hirschfield, who just last year retired as the head baseball coach at New York Tech, has been an absolute fixture in amateur baseball in the Northeast for, I hate to say the number, because Hirsch is looking at me like, but it's got to be 40 years. I mean, it's ridiculous. Well, Bob, good morning. Thanks for joining me on the show. How are we doing?
Good morning, Tony, and I'm glad to be up here to join you this morning.
It is absolutely my pleasure. And listen, if you want to ask Coach Hirsch a question or two, or if you want to respond to anything that we're discussing this morning, or if you got your own Coach Hirsch story of your own that you want to tell, the studio lines are indeed open at 855-HEY-COACH. That's 855-439-2622. A little later on the show, part of me is hoping we don't have time to do this, but if you had not heard, yesterday the verdicts came down on Jerry Sandusky. And I'm trying not to smile because I know we're going to be on YouTube. But the bottom line to all this is guilty as charged. And I mean on almost every count. 45 of 48 charges brought against him. He was found guilty. And I believe he has been now convicted of 17 separate felony charges. Part of me doesn't want to discuss it at all because you never want to dampen a day when you've got a coaching legend sitting next to you. So we're going to jump right into it. And like I said, if you have questions for Hirsch, or an old story you want to tell, or anything you want to reflect on based on what we're talking about, give us a call in the studio here. But, Bob, how do I say this? You've seen and helped countless young athletes, as young as age 7 and upwards through true manhood graduating college. In fact, we started talking about the youngsters. If I'm not mistaken, you got about 300 or so of them waiting for you on Monday when you start the baseball academy, correct?
Yeah, on Monday we have 2 programs going on in Port Washington for the Port Youth Activities, which actually was a former run by Ronnie Henderson, and our friendship has gone on for many years. And we played against each other in high school, and yet we still maintain friendships past that. And the other was the long-standing one with the Rockville Center Recreation Department. So we got all these youngsters, 7 to 12, coming in on Monday, and you know, all they want to do is play baseball and learn a little bit more about the game and have fun doing it. And that's really what the whole focus of any of our programs have been about. And actually, that's what it is coaching in college. It's really the same thing. It's just a more sophisticated level of play.
Well, and sophisticated level of coaching too, because I will tell you, if you don't know who Bob Hirschfield is, he is the godfather of Northeast baseball, no question. And anybody, honestly, anybody who has ever played for or against Coach Hirsch has nothing but accolades. And it's because of, I think, the way you've done what you've done. Because while Coach is talking about Port Washington and Rockville Center and these little programs, which are still not that little anymore, the crown jewel in the Hirschfield legacy is the New York Baseball Academy. That is without question, the most well-run baseball summer camp ever. And it goes back as far as I was one of the kids that went to that camp.
Yeah. Well, you know, if you're going to talk about the baseball academy, it's really the same thing that we did in the communities. It's just now we have the ability to reach out to other communities and they commute into a nice campus. It's a beautiful campus up on the North Shore of Long Island. But I have to mention my wife Rita because while I was coaching and teaching, because I was never a full-time coach. I was always a part-time coach at NYIT. It was my wife Rita who's been by my side and been my partner in life and a partner in business. And our kids all got raised through it, all 4 of them. So it's been a lot of fun. And, you know, youth sports today is there's just so much specialization and travel teams, and it's almost to the point that sometimes it gets too organized. And I think one of the things when we started the camp program, many years ago is because there was no place to play, and now there's a million places to play.
Too many places to play. In fact, I wanted to ask you, you've coached kids, like I said, 7 years old playing baseball. You've coached grown men who've gone on to play in the major leagues. What do you think are some of the most important things to focus on with the younger athletes as you're training them? Because I always looked at the New York Baseball Academy, and this is a compliment, and I hope you take it as such. I always looked at it as a fun place. It was a summer camp where we were learning baseball. It wasn't a hardcore baseball camp that had that mindset. You always kept it fun. You surrounded yourself with incredible instructors that made it fun, but the kids always knew, based on the level of sophistication of these coaches, that it was something special. And no one's been able to duplicate what you did. But when you talk about training these younger kids, what are the most important things to focus on?
First of all, it's about them. Mm-hmm. It's about the children. It's about when I say children, it could be 7, it could be 18, they could be 21. You know, I think one of the most important things about being a manager is never forget what it is to be a player. And if you always can keep that in context in anything you do, it makes you a better coach. And I think every year you coach, you become a better coach. And you learn by experience, and a lot of times you learn by mistakes. You know, when I was in the Marine Corps, you used to learn one thing. It was called IAA, improvise and adjust. Because whatever you plan for, there's always going to be an adaptation off of that. But going back to what you were saying about young children, whether it's 7, 8, or 9, is your goal is to try to allow them, put them into a position that they can learn how to be better. And they can learn how to be better by playing with each other. Teaching young players how to practice, how to come up with different types of games. The more times you put them in a contest or a game situation, obviously they have more chances to win, but they also have more chances to lose. Mm-hmm. And I think it softens it up. I think sometimes in youth sports, they play so many games, they need to play less games and practice more. Mm-hmm. And coaches need to be able to focus on how to make practice more fun, shorter durations, probably more frequently than they do. I mean, we got into these travel teams. I mean, some of them, they might play 4 or 5 games on a weekend, and they have a practice on Wednesday, and half the team doesn't show up because they have a lot of other things to do. And sometimes we wear parents out, too, with all this travel around.
Oh, it clearly wears the parents out. There's no question. Now, like I said, there was always something magical about the way you maintain that fun environment. But you said something that I want to get your real opinion on, because nothing to do with your age, but you are old school. And I tend to lean more towards old school. More opportunities to win. I'm so glad you followed that up with more opportunities to lose, because I got to tell you, personally, I think we are building such soft skin on our kids. It's almost like parents don't want their kids to lose at anything ever. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the reasons why parents have become so problematic in the youth sports equation. Well, listen, when we were kids, what did we do? We just before the New York Baseball Academy was there for us, mm-hmm. we just would go choose up sides in the park. And it wasn't fun winning all the time. If the teams were lopsided and you and I were beating the snot out of the other kids, what do we do after a while? We said, you know what, this ain't working. Let's just re-choose sides. Mm-hmm. Kids were losing. You got over it. Life goes on. Now, if there's not a private instructor, correcting the kid in the car on the way home after a loss, parents feel like they're failing.
Yeah, well, you mentioned the Sandusky situation. I mean, there is a legitimate concern to let your kids just go out and play now. Mm. I think more things come to light. And now they want to make sure that at least there's a supervisor overseeing what's done. They may not run the operation. In the old days when we were in the city, there used to be the parkie. The parkie was in charge of opening the facility. He'd give you a hard time if it was raining, you couldn't get out on the facility. But he was sort of the guy that sort of overlooked. And if there was a problem, he would come out and try to get you to solve the problem. There was always somebody that was overseeing. Parents used to feel a little more comfortable about that situation. Today, it's tough to let your kids go. So what would become is the summer playground.
Well, yeah, and that's important that there are places like that to have. And I'm thinking much less along the lines of the kids just going out and playing, but more along the lines of when the supervision wasn't there, you were forced to deal with the disappointment. You were forced to deal with, we lost. I'm telling you, it cracks me up. Because now, Hirsch, that I coach a pretty serious level of ball myself, and you can't see it. If a kid strikes out, I will joke with my other coaches and say, How long before Dad takes a walk over to the dugout to hand him the strategic Gatorade to try to tell him what he did wrong? Sometimes you just strike out. Mm-hmm. I mean, agree with this or not, Coach, if you can't accept failure, baseball, clearly, sports in general, but if you can't accept failure, baseball is not your game. It is a game of failure.
Well, it's difficult to accept failure. And, I watched the College World Series last night, South Carolina with Ray Tanner and Arkansas. Todd Butler is a friend of mine, was assistant there too. And one team's going to lose. I know these guys are adults and they're top prospects, but not everybody can win a game. Oklahoma City in basketball, great team, young team, very talented. They got beat. Sooner or later, everybody's on the sidelines in the whole country. There's only one winner, one overall eventual winner. But at the same time, when you're dealing with youth sports, I watched my grandson's team. I saw probably the first or second game. They weren't too good. I'll be quite frank with you. They weren't too good. The kids didn't know what was going on. The guys were running around. He's 10 and 11-year-old kids. And the end of the year, they wound up winning the whole thing. I watched the championship game. And it looked like they all knew where they had to go. They were backing up bases. Very enthusiastic. Great coach, by the way. Very enthusiastic and positive with these young players. And it was both coaches. It was also the coach of the losing team. And the way they handled their little ceremony at the end was a real class act. It was out in Northport Little League.
Okay.
And it was outstanding. They did a wonderful job, and they create a very good environment. It's a local league. And, when we talk about travel teams, I think a lot of parents might have a question. There's 8 U teams travel. Sometimes organizations are forced into creating more travel teams to satisfy parental concerns or dealing with youngsters that maybe perhaps didn't make the travel team. I don't know how you feel, Tony, or your audience feels, but to me, travel, everything should be local almost to the age of 12. Stay local. When you get to be 13 or 14, that's when it can be introduced. And I remember when my children were growing up, I had a friend of mine, Ronnie Gurecki. Some of you might remember him, played for LIU, outstanding outfielder, still coaches at Cardozo High School. And Ronnie used to say the most important thing is to get your at-bats and get your innings on the mound and find a team where that can be achieved. Mm-hmm. So often, so many people, when I was growing up, it was the Flushing Tigers, which became the Long Island Tigers.
How dare you say I'm wearing a Bayside Yankees jersey, and you go with Tigers first.
Well, the Tigers were the first.
They were before us,
under Emil Gall and Warren Ammon, and then Mark brought up the Bayside Yankees, and those became the premium teams. There's no doubt about it in the New York area, but that's their goal. But everybody wanted to be on these organizations, and all of a sudden it had to filter down to the 17-year-old team, have 2 18-year-olds, 2 60, which is fine. Those are travel teams.
Yep.
But then we get organizations that go down to 12U, 11U, 10U, and you can't find the same competition within a close area. I mean, parents have more than one child. The girl might be playing soccer or basketball. The boy might be playing base. We have to get all these children to all these games. You feel like a taxi cab.
Hirsch, I'm living it. I got a daughter who's playing competitive lacrosse. Mm-hmm. I got a daughter who's playing competitive softball travel, and I got this knucklehead here who's playing for the Bayside Yankees. He and I get on an airplane Tuesday to go to the Freshman World Series in Springfield, Missouri. Mm-hmm. It is out of control. But you said one thing that I really wish more parents would get their arms around. When you're picking a travel team, you know what? Listen, the Bayside Yankees isn't for everybody. Really isn't. Flushing Tigers, the Long Island Tigers, all these teams, they're not for everybody. Instead of saying, I want to find a team that plays at a certain level, parents really, in my opinion, need to say, I need to find a team that plays to my kid's level. Because if you're just riding the bench on the best team in the world, especially at the younger ages, there's nothing developmental about that versus being the best kid on the worst team. At a certain age, would you agree? Maybe it's better to be the best kid on the worst team than the bench warmer on the best team?
Well, I think, I came across that with my own son, Michael, who became a very good shortstop at Yale for a number of years. And I remember when he was down, he was 14 or 15, and I took him down to the Tiger workout. And granted, I knew everybody. And they came up to me and I said, well, what do you think your chances of, we really want him on a team. I said, well, really, how much do you think he's going to play? Well, he should play about half the time. I appreciated their honesty. I thought they were very honest. I needed to find a place where my son could probably play a little bit more than that. And I went over to a nice little organization over in Hirsch. It was called the Astros, run by some wonderful guys. I wouldn't say they had Major League Baseball knowledge, but you know what they had? They had Major League ability to be able to relate to young players and families. And my son went over there, and finally, some other kids wound up moving over there that I thought were pretty decent players. Do you know that 7 of those players wound up playing in college? 6 of them in Division I. 3 players were drafted, and 1 became a Division I All-American. And that was, they didn't make the premium teams. But they
got
chose
their reps.
That's exactly right.
They got their reps.
Because kids develop at different levels, ages. Some kids grow. I mean, I had a first-round draft pick, Al Watson. If you saw him in high school as a junior, he was probably 5'10", left-handed center field, a skinny kid. Pretty good basketball player, by the way. I think I was one of the only colleges that offered him a scholarship in baseball and wound up being a first-round pick and an All-American as a hitter. But he grew. Al Watson was his name, out of Christ the King. And he became like 6'2", 6'3", 205.
And you
That's
actually
a lot of years in the major leagues.
You mentioned something that Watson was at least up until that point, junior, senior year of high school, he was more known for playing basketball, especially at a school like Christ the King. When we get back, because we're going to have to take a quick break here, when we get back, I'm going to talk to Hirsch a little bit about specialization. And this is a guy who has dominated Northeast baseball, and I think you're going to want to hear his opinions about kids that pick one sport at too young an age. You're not going to want to miss that. Stick around. We'll be right back.
Coach Tony.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. You're listening to Tony Fiorino on the Hey Coach Tony Show on ESPN Radio, 940 and 1510 ESPN in New York and Connecticut, and live online at ihigh.com. Joined this morning in studio by Coach Bob Hirschfield, an absolute baseball legend here in the Northeast. And Bob, before we get back into things, I just want to remind our listeners that I believe, and if this is true, you're going to want to take advantage of this. There are a couple of slots left at the Academy in some of the programs, correct?
There's always room at the Academy for good guys.
Coach Hirsch always makes room. What's the website for the Academy, Coach, so people can check it out?
www.ny, like New York, baseballacademy.com.
nybaseballacademy.com. Go check that out. The level of instruction there is just ridiculous, and it always has been. And what I love is that most of the old guys still stick around and come back. I mean, it's like the Supreme Court with your coaching staff. Unless you die, everyone.
They have to become more administrators. We still like some young blood in there with the college players.
But Mrs. Hirsch still, runs everything, right? She's the reason we're in business.
She's the Energizer Bunny, and she creates the jobs for everybody, because when she goes on that phone, and she talks very sincerely to parents, because she's gone through it as a parent.
Yep.
And whether it's baseball, whether it's basketball, whether it's my daughter's lacrosse, whether it was equestrian, my daughter also did horses and figure skating, things like that. I mean, she's had a wide range of sports with 4 children, so she can speak from many different points of view.
And you know what? I wasn't even going to say this, but I got to tell you, because my son was asking me as I made sure he was on his best behavior meeting Coach Hirsch. I'm a little disappointed that we don't have Mrs. Hirsch with us, because I would have loved to have seen her, but I'll make the trip out and see her. But the reason I mention this, any good, let's take it a step up. If you want to be a great coach, you got to live and breathe this stuff. And I got to tell you, one of the reasons some of the greats like you, like Tony DiMatteo in football, they have wives that are not just tolerant, not just supportive, but they live and breathe the stuff. And I'll give my 5-minute props that every single guy who came through the Academy, to this day, bump into Mrs. Hirsch, there's going to be hugs and kisses.
That's right.
And it just, no one else has that. Kids who run around Somers who play for DiMatteo, they see Mrs. DiMatteo and she's carrying a bag of groceries, they're going to grab them and put them in a car for her. Mm-hmm. So maybe during the next break you can help me get Mrs. Hey Coach Tony to lighten up a little bit, because we are in the height of Bayside Yankee season, and I'm telling you, there was a noose in my bathroom with my name on it. All right, yeah. We'll deal with my therapy later, but I wanted to get back to the point you brought up specific to Watson, because while a kid, became an incredible prospect and got drafted, up until he left high school, he was predominantly a basketball guy. He was a good basketball player. What do you tell a parent that says to his 7-year-old kid, if you want to go make it in the major leagues, stop playing basketball, stop playing football. We need to do baseball in the fall, baseball in the spring, baseball in the summer, and if it's not weights, it's indoor batting instruction during the winter. What do you tell people like that?
Well, there's nothing the matter with continuing to play with one sport, but there are tremendous advantages in being involved with different sports as a younger player. Your main goal is really to try to get your child to become more athletic, more fit, be involved, be active. We grew up in the old, you were a football player, then you were a basketball player, and then you were a baseball player. And there's a lot to be, I mean, obviously there's more sports now because soccer's involved. There's lacrosse involved now. There's other winter sports, swimming, things like that. The important thing is, I think, with playing a lot of sports, is each sport has their own niche that makes someone a better athlete, quicker reactions, better agility. And you work with different peer groups. You learn most of these are all team sports I'm speaking to. They're not golf or individual tennis. So they're team sports, and you learn to deal with different individuals, different adult authorities that are in charge of those respective teams. And I think, how does someone, when you go back to elementary education, because that's sort of my background too, besides coaching, is, how does someone have a friend? Well, the friend starts out as the child that sits next to him in class. And it gradually gravitates to another student that's in the class, until it graduates into the student in some other class, to the whole school. And a team is nothing more than that. It's friendships of working with each other. Everybody has pluses, everybody has minuses, but, that's how you develop leaders. What does a leader do? A leader's responsibility, first and foremost, is how do you take responsibility to make other people better? Mm-hmm. And if you can develop that leadership as a teacher or as an adult to create that leader, that lends to every team. So it's not only learning different friendships, it's learning different athletic ability, learning to deal with, you talk about wins and losses. There's pluses and minuses to everybody in the world. Mm-hmm. And you emphasize what could they bring to the table that makes a team better or a group better. Doesn't matter whether you're in a speech or debate club. It's the same thing. Or you're in a school play. It's the same thing as working with a team. And I think, going back to your original question, I hope I didn't get off the topic a little bit, but try to stay with a few sports. Eventually, they're going to discriminate what they like and dislike. And they'll graduate it down. Maybe by 10 or 11 and 12, they'll start to say eliminate one or two. And then all of a sudden they're down to two, and off they go to the races. Which one do they feel they maybe have the most success at?
A lot of times it's based on what they're good at, what they're excelling at. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's their body type. A lot of times, unfortunately, it is the parents who think that these kids should be driven. I mean, listen, Hirsch, bottom line, when I was a kid, things like the New York Sports Academy, New York Baseball Academy were just starting out. Now, it seems like on every street corner there's a private instructor who not only can teach your kid, but these guys are hard sell. They want your kid 12 months a year, whether it's Parisi, whether it's baseball, whether it's softball, whether it's basketball. There's not a sport you can play where you can't play it 12 months a year anymore. Are parents drinking too much of the Kool-Aid?
Well, I think they're seeking out what they think is going to be make their child better, which you can never find fault with that. Every parent does, whether you're in the 6th grade class and you get a different homeroom teacher versus another homeroom, they want somebody else, they think is going to do a better job with their child. And there's nothing wrong with that. But, when you talk about lessons, I think lessons do have a value to some players. But I think where do lessons start? I think the best thing about lessons, and there are good people and there are so-so people that are doing lessons. First thing about lessons with the younger players, I like to see more group lessons. Mm-hmm. You have a young players, I'm talking about 9, 10, put them together as 4 in a group and get an instructor for 1 hour, not just a half hour in and out. And that way it's a little more of a socialization concept. The other thing is when you're shopping for an instructor, because you are really shopping today. I was the first one that ever did lessons on Long Island. I did them for 10 hours a day. Donnie Cooper, pitching coach of the Chicago White Sox, side by side. We did 10 hours a day apiece. I mean, it was nuts. And you had to press a fresh start. I think one of the things, parents, go observe the instructor, work with children of your age that you want. Some guys do a better job with a 17-year-old than they might do with a 9-year-old. It might be the time of day. You know, we used to do 10 hours. I thought we did a pretty good job 10 hours in a row. But we were high energy. You know Donnie. I mean, he could go 24 hours a day. And that's why he's such a successful major league coach. And go watch them. Then make the determination. That's the number one question I get over the phone, because people do call me all year long. And we just talk. We talk about different questions they have. Go watch. There are very good ones, there are good ones, and there are so-so ones. Sometimes it's a danger having a little bit of knowledge in this game, too, in any game.
Well, and you mentioned even time of day. I will tell you, I know for a fact that most of these places, especially the franchise places, and I'm not going to use names, but these folks primarily slot you with an instructor based on what time you're available and what time he or she's available, and nothing more. You know, everyone is kind of jack of all trades. Can I do pitching lessons? Yeah, I could. But I'm really, a hitter and infield guy. So should I be instructing a pitcher? No. But if you're coming in on Wednesdays at 6 and that's a slot that I got open, you're going to get me. And that's a real problem with that. All right, listen.
Well, one other point about that, about lessons. You know, lessons, and I'm going to go back to Frank Morris, because you know Frank Morris at St. Agnes.
Frank
a
Morris,
legendary basketball coach, and who never played basketball, by the way.
He was a lacrosse guy, right?
He was a lacrosse guy and a former professional baseball pitcher, which a lot of people don't know, even though he was like 5'9". But Frank was a great shooting coach, one of the best in the country. And he always used to say it's great to practice the parts, but you have to always be able to practice the whole. And I'll go back to lessons. Most people want to learn their position better. They want to hit better in baseball. Okay, so they go to pitching lessons. That's sort of the predominant thing, because that's your best player is usually your pitcher, your shortstop, and you want to hit. Well, that's only one aspect of playing baseball. Playing the game of baseball is a lot more. That involves a team, situational hitting, learning how to foul pitches off, learning how to bunt the ball, learning how to go base hit bunt, hit and run. It's how you play the game. It doesn't teach someone how to play baseball. It teaches someone to be a little bit better at one specific skill.
And mechanically, and really mechanically. Like, see, you taught and still do teach aspects of the game. Things that my son, as a 14-year-old ball player, was taught. He starts to hear about productive outs. And it seems for them, for a 14-year-old kid, that's an oxymoron. What do you do with a guy on third base with nobody out? Hit it as far as I can. What do you do with a man on first base, 2 outs? Hit it as far as I can. No. There are productive ways to get out. There are times when you want to move a runner over. And this is the kind of stuff that Hirsch and I can talk about all day long. We actually have to get to another break. But before we do, I want to remind you that on the way back in here, we're going to start talking about school teams versus travel teams. You got questions for Hirsch, give us a call in the studio at 855-HEY-COACH. I know I'm hogging up a lot of his time. But when we get back, we'll have more with Bob Hirschfield. You're listening to Hey Coach Tony. Stick around. I'll be right back.
Coach Tony.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. You're listening to Hey Coach Tony on ESPN Radio every Saturday morning at 9 a.m., or I should say every Saturday morning except for the next one or two. I am actually jumping on an airplane with TJ. We are with the Bayside Yankees going to the Freshman World Series, the premier World Series in Springfield, Missouri. So wish us all luck. All right, so we're joined in studio this morning by Bob Hirschfield, who is absolutely one of the absolute living legends in Northeast baseball. We don't talk enough about this academy. And I know you you go low key on the academy, but I can't say enough about the staff that you've built and the environment you've created for young kids. And I will tell you, if you're not sure what you're doing this summer and you are within commute distance to the North Shore of Long Island, go to nybaseballacademy.com and check it out. It is a life-changing experience. Before the break, we were talking about some of these private lessons. Another question I get a lot, and it's not as much baseball because the school season and the summer season are separated, and even places like the Bayside Yankees, we don't do a spring season anymore. There's very little overlap, and when a kid has a school game, we send them there. But I want to get your opinion on this. What do you think about the benefits of, and let's even say basketball? What's the benefit of playing for your school versus playing for, let's say, an elite AAU travel team? I mean, every sport has travel teams, and more they're conflicting and competing with the good old days of getting your varsity letter. What do you think?
Well, I think that's a good question, and recruiting from a college standpoint has drastically changed in the last decade. College coaches used to go to a lot more high school games because the recruiting process was a little later. Now they're involved with these, not involved because they can't speak to them, but at least observing things in their sophomore year. And where does somebody get a head start on that as a college coach? Look, they make very good money, but the pressure's on their back. You got a big job, you make big money, but you can have a quick exit.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt about it. And so they're going to start that process back in the sophomore year. And they're going to start to make evaluations and observations, but not conversations. And they might talk to the high school coach, but what becomes the summertime, the AAU leagues, I don't even know that I'm so much I used to be heavy into the basketball loop because I coached basketball for a lot of years, and most of my friends became major coaches in either college or the NBA. And I chose to go baseball. But the point of the matter is that it starts earlier and earlier. And we have perfect game tournaments. We have the Bayside Yankees. It's important to be on the scene to be evaluated. Also, to go to the campus. Each campus has their own program. I do one with Coach Blankmeyer from St. John's.
Yep.
At NYIT. Very successful pep program. But every college campus has their own programs, whether it's Fordham, whether it's Yale University, whether it's University of Maine, South Carolina. Sure. Ray Tanner has one. Jimmy Morris has one at Miami. People have to understand where they want to spend their money because there's only so much money in the till. Is it worthwhile? The determination is somebody interested in you. They'll send you a questionnaire. The high school teams, it was very hard for me to even see a high school game during the season. We play almost every day or practice, and people say, well, come down and watch me play. Well, quite honestly, I want to work with my team. Sure. They're the guys that said yes. They're the guys that I have to follow and academically to make sure, they're carrying their books and their pens and pencils Sure. and their computers now to class and following up with them. That's where my time has to be spent.
Yeah, I mean, the few times and by the way, because Coach Hirsch and I have a long-standing relationship, the times that you watched me play in high school, quite frankly, were when we were in championship games and playing at New York Tech.
That's right. That's correct.
You were the first guys to have the ice machine in the dugout, so we loved that. I mean, it was a great place to play, but it wasn't like now. You've got dedicated guys you can send to go recruit. I mean, hell, even we as the Bayside Yankees, we have guys around the country recruiting guys. Mm-hmm. I mean, and if you don't, listen, Hirsch and I were joking during the break. My good friend Mark Cassetta, who founded the Bayside Yankees, just spent 2 weeks of driving himself and every other executive member of the Bayside Yankees crazy because he lost 5 high school seniors to the draft. 4 of them were pitchers. Mm-hmm. How do you put together a top 10 nationally ranked program when you lose 4 pitchers and a starting lineup player to the draft? I mean, the exposure is what it needs to be. But I got to tell you, the question I have is it bordering on, I hate to say immoral, but is there some sense of under-the-table stuff when you, like you said, you can't talk to a high school sophomore as a college coach. But
or junior.
But you can have him attend your camp in the summer. Do you think there are coaches who try to use that as a leg up as a recruiting tool?
Well, I think the leg up is having one on the campus. The only thing we're allowed to do, and they're pretty strict about this, and the guys I know, they follow the rules. And I'll be honest with you, the guys I know are all Division I guys or Division II guys. They're very adept at knowing the rules, number one, and following them. And what they do is do a presentation, a general presentation about recruiting, the process. The key is academics because that makes things easier. You got a lot of kids that want to go, let's say they want to go south, and they're going to all state schools. Well, academics are the key. I mean,
sure, that's where you find the extra money.
That's exactly right because that money, he may have only state scholarships. And
Hirsch, how many? Let me answer this. How many as a Division I school, which New York Tech was or is? How many scholarships can you give out?
The maximum was 11.7, and the average roster size in Division I is probably in the neighborhood of 32 to 33 players on your roster. So you just do the math. And
how many pitchers did you give rides to? You don't tell me. You can't tell me your starting lineup was all full Scott. You had to get creative. If you see, I hit bombs, but I'm a moron. TJ hits bombs, but he's a straight A student. He's going to get more money because you can go dip into the academic side of things.
Well, there's also another
I oversimplified that, right?
You did, and that's okay, because you have to understand that the academic money gets combined with the baseball money as a total grant, unless he's exempt. The high school student is exempt. The exemption would be a 3.5 GPA, over 1,200 on your SATs. That's 2 parts. Okay. Used to be the top 10% of your class, but a lot of schools don't even rank the students anymore. So, you had to be exempt. If that student, say, had a 90 average, say he went to a very good academic school, he had a 90 average, and he qualified for X number of dollars academically, that wouldn't count against you. But if that student just had an 80 average, now that academic money counts in addition to the baseball money.
So, in other words, if none of your players were the 90 or the 3.5, no matter how you slice athletic versus academic, it's still that 11.7.
It's all one part of 11.7.
The Hey Coach Tony show, you learn something new every single day.
I don't think a lot of people really understand that concept. And 11.7 is not – there's a lot of pressure by the coaches to increase. We used to – when I first started at NYIT, it was 13 was the maximum. And it was a 10% reduction that the NCAA made, not just to baseball, but it was across the board to the non-revenue sports. And but baseball's becoming a revenue sport.
Yep.
Hockey's become a revenue sport.
Just ask my good friend Matt Sank, who I will talk about him when he get back. You want to hear how small the world is? You know what? We're going to go to an early break, because I got to tell you one thing I do. Here's part of the reason I have a radio show, and if you've listened to this, at all on a consistent basis, you know that one of the reasons I do what I do is because I have a tremendous sense of having to give back. And the reason I invited Coach Hirsch in to talk with me today is because, one of the things I did very poorly as a child was respect my coaches. And when we get back, I want to talk specifically about how and why you need to have respect for your coaches. And I'm going to give you a little flavor on just how fortunate I was and how I squandered that when I was a kid. You're not going to want to miss this. You're listening to Hey Coach Tony. Stick around. I'll be right back.
Coach Tony.
Welcome back, everybody. You're listening to the Hey Coach Tony show on ESPN Radio. Joined in studio this week by my good friend Bob Hirschfield. Bob is, one of the most respected, if not the most respected, baseball guy in the Northeast, and the impact he's had on the lives of young men throughout the Northeast is unheralded. I kind of had a little bit of a therapy session during the week when I heard Hirsch wanted to join me, and the fact of the matter is it's because I got to tell you, I know for a fact that coaches are not respected to the level that they should be, and that's a fact. And I know that before we went to break, I know, Hirsch, you want to give some props to some of the other folks, because you're not the only guy in the Northeast who does it the right way. There are plenty of guys, and the funny part is I've had exposure to so many of them. But let's talk about some of the best guys in the Northeast as far as you're concerned.
When you have to go back, when I was a young coach in college, guys like Andy Baylock at University of Connecticut, John Winkin at Maine, Mike Shepard at Seton Hall, Freddie Hill at Rutgers, who's still coaching. I mean, these guys were class. Jack Kaiser, my former coach at St. John's. I mean, these are the guys. They were your role models as a young coach, and I always remembered how they handled when I had a win against them. What gentlemen they were. I mean, they might go out and shoot a team out for 2 hours. I remember one time when I beat Seton Hall, Coach Shepard, 2 hours, talked to his team in right field. It was dark. The gates were still open. I had to come back and lock the gates. He was still, but he was a gentleman. He told me how great our program was making progress, and he appreciated the fact that we could come. I mean, he was as you become the elder statesman, you try to remember the way those veteran coaches were with you to young coaches that you were involved with.
Well, look at some of the guys now. You mentioned Shepard. Who was under Shepard for the longest period of time?
Ed
Blankmeyer or St. John's. Ed recruited me.
Yeah.
I was supposed to. I mean, you were fortunate enough to offer me some money. Offered me some money, and I was going to be playing baseball with Mo Vaughn Greg Biggio.
Yeah.
I mean, we won't get into the therapy session of why I didn't go to either of those schools, which I got another 2 hours in me. But these are legends. These are great people who are shaping lives.
I watched Coach Blankmeyer this year because I was broadcasting with Warner Fussell, did all the TV work. The late Warner Fussell, God rest his soul. But I watched Coach Blankmeyer and Scotty Brown and Mike Campton, the coaches, and also Brendan Monahan, the volunteer, evolve that team. They had great accolades to come to start the year, and they was really struggling. And I watched that team just turn the corner. They had guys that didn't play the first half of the year. The center fielder, senior, hardly played for 3 years, became an integral part. The second baseman became their third baseman. They put a second baseman in that had no at-bats, Brett Dennis. Sean O'Hare moved over to third. He became all-region. Schwindel, the backup catcher, became the first baseman and the cleanup hitter. And everybody talked about Jeremy Boss. Mark Wessinger was the second baseman for 3 years, became their shortstop. To Joe, I watched, and great job managing, making pitching changes. What a brilliant job coaching. And they lost the Super Regionals to Arizona, who's now in the finals of the College World Series. Just a great year. Then my buddy Matt Senk, who you remember from St. Agnes High School.
Oh, I'm going to have a therapy session on Matt Senk.
He took over. We had one interim coach, Mike Ryan, my JV basketball coach.
Yeah, but Hirsch, what you don't realize, and this is part of the reason why I did the show, and this is part of my therapy session, through my 4 years of high school and my 4 years of college baseball, I had 6 head coaches. 6 head coaches. That's how Matt Senk. For those of you who've been living in a cave, Matt Senk is the head coach at Stony Brook, and he went through
what a job he did. Unbelievable.
The most heralded Cinderella story in the College World Series, probably you could argue ever. I mean, what he accomplished was nothing short of miraculous. I think he was the only number 4 seed to ever get the whole way through to the Super Regionals.
It's in a new era. It's more than that. It's the new era of 64 teams and regionals that are not regionally based.
Yeah.
Where they seed the teams, and you got to play in their ballpark.
Mm-hmm.
And he made the House of Pain reverse.
Yeah.
I mean, what a great job.
Who did he do it to? LSU. Miami.
LSU. Unbelievable. At Miami. Well, Central Florida were the real big wins there. Not so much Miami, even though Miami was seeded, in my opinion. But the job he did, and watching those guys evolve over the years. I remember telling Matt, the first year they went to Division I, we played each other every year. And I went out there and I said, Matt, I don't know whether they realized this at Stony Brook. Dick Laskowski was their AD at the time, another St. John's guy, and who did a wonderful job developing athletics there. But I said, Matt, your team is more ready to play Division I than any team in this institution. And he said, thanks for the compliment. I said, no, I'm not complimenting you. I said, it is what it is. I said, and he just kept building on it and building on it and building on it.
Well, when he got there, they were D3, correct?
Oh, yeah.
He took an obscure D3 program that when I played at Mercy, we used to go beat up on them on a regular basis. It was before Matt got there. I never played against Matt. But I will tell you, my Matt Senk story is his first head coaching baseball job was at St. Agnes, which doesn't even exist anymore. It's now Kellenberg. But it was my senior year. And Hirsch never saw this side of me, so this may be news. But I was but it's a fact. I'm surprised the phone lines aren't lighting up with people who just want to shred me. I was the big, bad senior stud. And here comes a new coach who's never been a head coach before. And I'm embarrassed in front of my son to say that I gave Matt Senk such a hard time. That was my team. It wasn't his. And I was the jerk that no coach ever wants to coach. Hirsch won't buy it because he's the only baseball guy who ever had my respect from day one. But now, between having exposure to guys like Hirsch, having exposure to guys like Mark Cassetta, who I treated like garbage, by the way. The reason I coached the Bayside Yankees is because of how badly I treated Mark Cassetta.
It's a payback?
Payback is one way of looking at it. But, no, I mean, I was on Mark's first national championship team. And I treated – and all of us, we get reunions every once in a while, and we all talk about we had no idea what that guy was doing for us. Matt Senk, is he perfect? Hell no. But, boy, is he passionate. And, boy, does he have the best interest ultimately in the kids. And – that's why I coach with Mark, and that's why as soon as Matt Senk's life settles down, I have rounded up all the old St. Agnes guys, and we are going to take him out for a beer, and there'll be a surprise or two for him. So I'll invite you down, Hirsch, because it will be a fun evening. But the point is, I make sure – here's what I'm trying to say. You met my son TJ today. When you first met him, what impression did he give you as a young man?
He's a gentleman.
Gentleman,
Yeah.
Respectful.
The way he shook my hand.
The way he shook your hand.
The way he looked at my eyeball contact.
Treated you ultimately with respect.
Mm-hmm.
All right. The reason I mention this is not to give myself a pat on the back as a father, because I'm not that great a dad. But I will tell you, I was that big a jerk as a kid that I will make sure that he does not make the same stupid mistakes that I make. Because you know what?
I feel like I'm in a confessional.
You are. You're here for therapy. Why do you think I invited you here? I literally will not let him make them. Hirsch, all kidding aside, I was good. I probably could have gotten a bus ride in the minor leagues. You know for a fact. You heard it. I was a lousy attitude player. And it took away from experiences. It took away from opportunities. And I had nobody. Playing for you would have been the best thing I could have done. No one ever steered me right to show me how stupid it was. How do we get parents to understand that these coaches, I mean, there are bad coaches. We know that. But, boy, how do we get them to understand that you start benefit of the doubt and understand that no one's doing this to hurt your kid? People want to help your kids. That's why we coach. How do we get that mindset back?
Well, first of all, as a player, let's deal player to player. We're responsible as a group to get better. And one of the ways that we can become better is get along better. And I think somebody has to learn to be more open. You know, one of the things I said to you, what are the qualities in coaching that I think are very, very important? Be fair, be firm, be honest, but you have to have the ability, you have to have knowledge. Mm-hmm. Knowledge is also important, but there's a lot of people that have knowledge, but it's not the knowledge that I have, it's the knowledge that my players are able to have.
Absolutely.
You got to be able to convey it.
Hang on a second, because
you have to have the ability to relate.
Well, and that's what you've had better than anybody else. I got to tell you, other coaches who deserve respect have fallen down on that. But I've been hogging you up the whole hour. I got to get to some of the calls here. Apparently, Adam is telling me that we got someone by the name of Hound Dog who is calling in on line 3. So, hey, Hound Dog, you're listening to Hey Coach Tony. How we doing this morning?
Hey, Coach Tony.
How we doing?
Is this Kojak from Rockville Center Camp?
Oh, my God. This is the Hound Dog, Nick Melito.
That's correct.
Oh,
and
Nick
that other guy sitting next to you must know who I am, too.
I know. I'm glad somebody's paying your phone bill so you can make a call.
No, I called collect. The guy wouldn't take the call, though.
Nick Melito, for those of you who don't know, coaches at McClancy High School in Queens, and he was one of the amazing staff at the New York Baseball Academy. And I got 2 seconds to tell my favorite Nick Melito story, because he was a younger guy back then, and he called me Kojak. That was my first baseball nickname. And it was because I was the ambitious kid that asked a ton of questions when I was younger. And I remember going to Nick, asking a bunch of questions one morning. He's about 3 bites into a ham, egg, and cheese with a coffee in his hand. And he finally says, "Kid, what's your name?" And I said, Anthony Fiorino. And he goes, "Fiorino, how do you spell that?" And I spell it out, and he goes, "Anthony Fiorino." I say, "Yeah." He goes, "Can you get the hell away from me for like 5 minutes?" But, hey, Hound Dog, I'm assuming you want to give some props to Hirsch. So what do you got for me?
Well, Hirsch is we're on radio, so I can't curse, but Hirsch is the only guy to make chicken crap into chicken salad.
Elaborate,
I'm the living proof of that.
Well, Nick, I still have a copy of your diploma. When I finally left NYIT, I took the copy of your college diploma, which we know we worked very hard. Nick was also, to people listening, became one of my assistant coaches. I had many former Tech players who came on staff for short, brief periods of time to get their degree and get extra credits and move on in life. But I always took a lot of pride when you finished that degree, Nick.
Well, all because of you, Hirsch. And I'll tell you another thing. I got my master's degree, too, through Tech with the help of Clyde and yourself. So,
well, I thought you got that through the mail.
I can't say enough good things about you.
Thanks a lot.
And,
thank you.
And we were at your little retirement party. That was pretty good too. But I was just thinking, if we ever had a roast, we could probably do a $100,000 fundraiser for the school.
Hey, Nick, you're joking around. That's my plan. I mean, let's hope Matt Sink is still busy, because that's my plan. We're going to roast the living castañas off of Matt Sink when he settles back in. And if you want to roast Hirsch, I love Hirsch more than any other baseball guy I ever met. I'd be more than happy to poke some fun at Hirsch, because I got some stories that'll embarrass the daylights out of this guy.
Well, we don't want to get into stories because there's millions of them. But, in all seriousness, I can't say enough good things about him. I think one of the best qualities he's got is loyalty. And I'll tell you, I know you guys have been talking about youth baseball, and today even in high school, the kids come up to a level. Obviously, every parent thinks their kid is super, and it's unfortunate, but there is not much loyalty left. And Hirsch is one of those guys that once you're one of his guys, you stay one of his guys for the rest of the time. And I try to do that with my players. I think I learned that from Hirsch.
Well, you know what, Nick? Like I said, for a guy who I hadn't seen for years, I remember you because the loyalty goes both ways, and that's what made Hirsch special as a college coach and continues to make him special. Nick, thanks for the call, man. Hey, listen, there you go. What'd I tell you? Today we should have done a 2-hour show. Folks, we want to give special credit to Bob Hirschfield. It's over. Exactly. Join us every Saturday at 9 a.m. We're missing next week, but we'll be back on the air soon. Enjoy your day.